So I'm going to say hi there to everybody that is watching, and welcome to our first series of the Winter Views 2021. I am your host, Katherine Silva. I go by Kat with a K, and today I'm having a conversation with fellow New England author Lewis. And how are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing very well, Kat. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. How you doing?
I'm good now. Doing well now.
That's
Um,
good.
so our topic today is ghost stories, tales as old as time, born out of seeds of retribution, guilt, sorrow, and madness. Ghost stories have fascinated us since the times of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, referenced in ancient texts and scrolls through multiple religious tomes and mythologies. Ghost spirits and phantasms have continued to haunt humanity through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and straight up to today. Since ghost stories and their many facets have intrigued us for so long, Kevin, I'd like to know from your perspective, what was your first ghost story and how did it inspire your writing as a horror author?
I think I think for me, I grew up with a deep appreciation for ghost stories. And really since an early age, I grew. I'm actually going to move a little bit. Sorry. Um, so yeah, I've really enjoyed ghost stories really since an early age. This is not good. I apologize for the light. Um, but I grew up reading like children's picture books, um, which I got as a kid. In fact, I still have some books like Walt Disney version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, that cartoon, which is still I think fun to watch and fun to read. I loved looking at the pictures, and I just loved reading the story. It was a creepy, it's a creepy Halloween tale, and it's a ghost story, takes place in New York, and it just I loved Halloween as a kid, and I just loved reading that. And I think stories like that, and also growing up, I read a lot of I would read books by the late great Robert Ellis Cahill. He actually wrote true nonfiction New England stories, about Salem, about aquatic, sea terrors. So I grew up, reading these true regional, ghost story accounts, and I think just the spookiness of the tales, both from the Legend of Sleepy Hollow to just reading about, historical ghostly accounts, just fascinated me with wanting to write my own tales of ghosts. And then, of course, when I got into middle school, I started reading Stephen King and books like like The Shining. Definitely fascinated or got me into reading horror, ghost stories as horror fiction. So it just it just started with me at an early age.
Nice, nice. And so just for our audience, what ghost stories have you written or have
Yep.
out
So
there?
I've written quite a few ghost stories. Actually, my first published. Oh, sorry, the delay. So my first published short story was a ghost story called "The Caretaker," which was published in the Halloween issue of Blood Moon Rising magazine, back in I think 2007, 2008, and that was a ghost story about a sort of elderly cemetery caretaker who basically kind of slacked on his job and was visited by some very angry ghosts. I've also written
Hmm.
a ghost story that was published in an anthology called Horror Carnival called The Ghost Room 315, which was about a married couple who stay at a hotel, and basically this wife encounters this sort of spooky ghost in a hotel. So that was a fun story to write. And most recently, I wrote a short story called A Ghostly Tour that took place at, speaking of Salem, it took place um, at Pioneer Village in Salem,
Huh.
Massachusetts, during a sort of horror kind of Halloween attraction. So that was a ghost story that took place there. So I love reading. I love writing ghost stories. I think they're fun in terms of the avenues you can explore with the different, you know, creative writing elements, blending, mystery, suspense, spookiness, and horror. I think there's so much you can work with a ghost story.
That's true. There are a lot of different ways that you can tell a ghost story and a lot of different types of ghosts that you can tell a story about. Um,
Exactly. You
yeah,
don't need. It doesn't even need to be horror. You can write. You can have like a super, like a paranormal, like mystery, that has like thriller elements, but it doesn't. I wouldn't necessarily call them horror. I'm actually working on a novel now about basically a guy that's plagued by ghosts. I wouldn't describe it as horror, more like a paranormal, like murder mystery, and it's something I need to
okay.
actually get working on. So I've been working on that for a
Yeah.
long time. Yeah. So ghosts can be like a lot of other supernatural elements. It doesn't necessarily need to be horror. It can be supernatural mixed with like thriller mystery. I just think it's interesting what you can do creatively with the different tropes.
Yep. Yep, that's true. When I was putting together my list of questions for you, I was thinking about what the first ghost story that I remembered was, or experiencing was, and it was actually the movie Ghost, the 1990 movie
Yep.
with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. And that one's not a horror movie either. It definitely has some scary parts in it. Um,
Yep.
but it was it's definitely stayed with me over the years.
Mm.
Um, it's pretty neat that you can tell so many different kinds of stories with ghosts. But um, they are certainly fun to be spooky with as well, and tell a horrifying story with. Um, so I do also have uh, another question about what is it about ghost stories that I guess draws you to them?
Hmm.
And do you have a favorite type of ghost story?
Yes. So for me, what draws me to a ghost story is, I think the biggest question of them all is, why are the ghosts there? Why is this supernatural entity haunting whatever it is they're haunting, whether it's a house, whether it's some kind of building, or just a person? Why is that ghost there? And a lot of times, it could be a number of reasons. It could be unresolved issues. It could be out for a ghost out for revenge, seeking revenge or justice. There's so many reasons why a ghost cannot sort of to kind of reference a really good show, Ghost Whisperer, why the ghost won't
Mm,
cross into the light. There's something keeping that ghost in the living realm, and that's what fascinates me when I read a ghost story, or say approach writing a ghost story. There's, for me, this, I think a ghost story that's definitely stuck with me definitely is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, just because it reminds me so much of Halloween, and it's just a really creepy, you know um,
mhm.
it's a creepy ghost story, spooky ghost story. But I think also, uh, for me, I think one of the interesting ghost stories that I've ever read is the novel The Haunting of Hill House, which is such a classic.
Mhm.
That book has stuck with me for quite a while. It's actually I read the book maybe a few years ago. I hadn't read it for really at all. I'd had it for a while, but I had never read it. I had watched the first movie version of that I had seen was the 1999 remake, which I still think is a
Mhm.
is a good movie. I know a lot of people don't like that movie. I still thought it was the first of that story that I had watched, and of course I saw the original Robert Wise Julie Harris starring movie in the 60s. But reading the book, and I was just rereading parts of it over the summertime, what really struck with me about that story that really stuck with me is, and I just kind of realized this when I was rereading it, is the 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 house itself is a character. I mean, yes,
Yep.
there's human characters. There's Eleanor. There's the doctor that brings the whole, the group together to study, the phenomena of hauntings. But it's and they all have their different storylines and character stories. But the house itself is a character. The way Jackson describes the house, you just feel like it's this like living, breathing place. Like
Yep.
the Yondabont movie, the house, moved and stuff like that. But the book itself it really kind of got to me as this like, living entity. And, because, you know, not to kind of, spoil it, but you don't really see any ghosts in the book, or you don't really read of any like apparitions kind of floating around like you do say in the Yondabont remake. So the house itself, like that's the ghost, and
Yeah.
it's preying on, particularly it's preying on Eleanor, and it's kind of like you
Yep.
have to ask yourself, like, why? Is it because of maybe who Eleanor is, her vulnerabilities? It's like, why would this house prey upon this very vulnerable woman? So that's kind of the ghost stories that stick with me, particularly the character-driven ones, where you get inside, like you see why the ghosts are either doing what they're doing, whether it's for good purposes or bad purposes. Like, why are they doing that? So that's always, and that's why I was such a big fan of Ghost Whisperer, is that, we got to see why the ghosts were still on this plane, why they needed Jennifer Love Hewitt's help. And I just thought that was really fascinating. We understood why the ghosts couldn't move on.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good show. I'd forgotten about that one actually.
Yeah. It's been a while
Um,
since that one's been on. I loved it.
did you see the new Mike Flanagan's version of The Haunting of Hill House?
Yes, I absolutely loved that. Have you watched it?
I watched it when it came out, and then I just rewatched it um
Really?
the other night, and it's so much it's interesting rewatching it from a from the point of view of just like taking notes versus watching it for entertainment the first time.
Mm,
You notice so much more and you're paying attention to so much more, and that idea of the house being a character is very, very strong um, in the TV series as well.
yeah.
And I almost think that it's pointed out a little bit more. It is a little more sinister in the TV series versus the book. Um,
Yes.
I like that. Um, I've definitely got a thing for that hungry house. That like
It,
house that likes to eat people, go after people.
yes,
It's
definitely.
a
I totally agree. More so than the book. It was, the show, which I thought was brilliantly done. It actually took me a while to watch it. I'm terrible at watching stuff, but I finally watched it. I think it was last year, and it blew me away just in terms of just the what Mike Flanagan and the writing team did to Shirley Jackson's novel. I mean, obviously, it's not a straight adaptation of the novel. If you've read Jackson's novel, but it really, I mean, it completely honors her book. I think, I mean, there are characters that are obviously named after Shirley Jackson's the characters in the Haunting of Hill House novel, and but they're very, obviously they're very different. In the show, they're a family that stayed in a house, and then some bad things happened, and it's the after effects of that house, and with these kids that are now adults later on. and the house is still preying on them. It
Yep.
was just, it was so well done. And there's some things I actually want to talk about, but I'm afraid because I don't want to like spoil anything. But there were, let's just say, like the ending of that show, it gets to you. It's so emotional, and I mean the acting is just it's beautiful and brilliant from the amazing cast. I loved it. It was interesting. I was the last couple of days I'm getting ready for this interview, and I've been listening to uh, haunted house stories, like music and soundtracks. And I was actually listening to, I think it's the Newton brothers that did, I think they score a lot of Mike Flanagan's projects, and I was listening to the Haunting of Hill House soundtrack on my iTunes, and it's
Yep.
just it's chilling and haunting and emotionally moving as was the show. So yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it's pretty eerie. I rewatching it that I think what struck me more this time around was definitely the house being a character, but also the types of people that ghosts and um who get haunted, I guess, the types of people that ghosts sort of go after, or that the house goes after. And that actually was one of my talking points
Mm-hmm.
tonight, was to talk about like what kind of characters ghosts are sort of drawn to. I had it written in a
Yep.
better way here
Yeah, I have a lot of notes on that
somewhere.
too.
Um, but yeah, just like
Yeah.
yes, that was my.
Yeah, I think I think like ghosts. I think definitely are drawn. I think vulnerable people. Um, they can sometimes kind of like latch on. I don't know if latch on is like a right word for that, but I think some ghosts are drawn to people who are either emotionally or somehow vulnerable for whatever reason, and they can torment them. There are cases of that. Obviously, in literature, I think The Haunting of Hill House is whether you read the novel or the adaptations are. It's definitely clear that the house is latching on to specifically Eleanor. I think also ghosts are drawn to whatever. I think ultimately whatever reason that is still you know um, keeping them sort of grounded in the living realm, whether that's if they're out for revenge. And I think one of my favorite ghost stories or ghost story movies of ghostly revenge is John Carpenter's The Fog, which I think is like such a creepy and awesome revenge ghost story about basically nautical ghosts seeking revenge on the ancestors of the people who kind of led them to their, you know, watery grave all those years ago. And I think so. There's definitely, and I think that there are just some ghosts they just wanna cause mischief. Whether it's they're either they might not even be drawn to anyone. They might just be they're just there to cause harm and destruction, really, for like no particular reason. We see that a lot in like a lot of like ghost thriller movies like Ghost Ship. Do we really
Yep.
know why some of the ghosts plagued the salvage crew on that ship? It's I mean, I love that movie. I think it's a fun movie, but it's some ghosts just want to cause a lot of trouble. But to go back, I'm kind of reading my notes here as I'm kind of going along, uh, and some I think ghosts are drawn to people who have, I think, are so like psychically, I think, attuned, kind of like in The Shining. The ghosts were like, kind of, they wanted little Danny Torrance's, power. I think that was a really good example of that. And then, of course, they preyed upon both. I mean, the white, Danny and his mother, but also Jack, and it kind of drew Jack Torrance into alcoholism. So I think, ghosts, some ghosts just, they either they might not have an agenda, they might just like to cause trouble, but some of them do, I think, have a reason. Um, and I think, some ghosts are drawn to people who might be able to, they know that that person might be able to actually help them resolve some issues that is keeping them to the living plane. So I think there's a lot of reasons why ghosts are drawn to um, whatever it is that they're drawn to. And I think that's kind of fascinating and interesting to read about and watch, um, whether it's in film, TV, or like documentaries, why ghosts are unable to move into the light.
Good points. Definitely a lot of good points there. Um,
You know,
so in terms of uh, disembodied spirits, poltergeist, wraiths, revenants, there is a lot of different ways that ghosts can manifest in literature and in film and other media. What would you say is the most interesting type of ghost to you?
I think what really, when I was at undergrad, I think and I've watched a couple recently with the Boston Horror Society, but I remember when I was in undergrad, it was I think the American remake of like Japanese horror boom started. And I remember like The Ring was really popular, and then the Grudge remake came out. And I think those movies were for me. I mean, I love I how like ghosts would sort of manifest themselves like they were like like they were like the dead kind of like come back to life, but they're almost like this like monstrous kind of form. So it's not it's they're not zombies, but it's like they're this like ghostly kind of entities that are taking it's like they're taking that human form, but it's like they're like demonic now. I'm not sure how you would kind of categorize that, but I was really fascinated by that. And like 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 children for me, what I think is interesting, and I was kind of reading about it this past summer, like ghostly children that are not. It's like they're the living embodiments of the children, but they're monstrous now. It's like it's the physical body, but it's like there's something demonic and monstrous about them now that kind of, and they're evil. And I think that to me kind of interests me. It's like, how did they become this horrific kind of entity now? It's like you can clearly see that it's so and so, but it's like that person should be dead. And it's like now they're back, and it's like it's I know that it's whoever that person is, but it's like they're different now and they're changed. So I think that those to me are the interesting ghostly entities to read about in literature, but also to see in movies like like The Ring, like Grudge, that they're just there. You really you can't escape them. It's particularly if they're in like horror stories, like you cannot escape them. It's like they can manifest. They can be there one moment and gone the next. And and they're like it's not like a spirit that disappears. They're like a physical form that can come and go kind of as it pleases. So I've been fascinated by those types of ghostly entities for a long time.
Hmm. I actually had a note here. I like I can't watch The Grudge. I just can't. It scares the crap out of me.
It's
And it
really
just
creepy.
makes me it's so creepy. But
It is.
it's really well done. Every iteration of that series is just really well
Yeah,
done, no
even the
matter
the newest remake
uh
I thought was really good. I enjoyed the newest remake. I think it came out in like 2019 or 2020. I thought that was really good. My favorite though is still the 2004 American remake with Sarah Michelle Gellar. That I remember seeing that in the theaters, and that was just I've still not watched the original, but I really didn't. I knew a little bit about it from reading like reviews and stuff, but that was just such a creepy uh, film. I saw it. I saw it with a roommate of mine in my undergrad, and it was just super creepy. Very hardcore for something that I think was PG-13, and even the music was just unnerving, and it's just very disturbing. You know, basically, it's about revenge. It's about this supernatural entity that it was wronged, and it, it it's come back to kind of undeadish kind of life, and like and you can't stop it. You can try and stop it. It's like it's on even though it's dead kind of to begin with, it's unkillable. The entity is like you cannot vanquish it. It keeps kind of coming back.
It's almost it's almost kind of like a curse that keeps like repeating with each person that walks into the house. Isn't that kind of the
Yeah,
idea?
it's like the curse
Like,
that keeps on giving that nobody wants. you
yeah,
know,
exactly. Uh,
so yeah, it's just you cannot, and like I think in the Grudge too, it crossed over to America. So it's like it crosses, across the ocean. So it's like you cannot vanquish. It just keeps it's like a virus that just keeps infecting people. And I think it kind of that we probably have another discussion on that it's kind of like a metaphor, but it's just it's an infection. It's if you encounter this entity, you're screwed. You're cursed, and it's not trying to get rid of it. To get that kind of off your back is not it is extremely difficult, and for some people, for some characters, say it's the end of them. So it's that's an interesting series, as is The Ring. I've seen the first couple of remakes of The Ring, and those are interesting as well.
yeah, that ring I unfortunately had to I was at a birthday party and that got put on as a movie to watch. Interesting choice. But I ended up watching it there and that was I yeah, no desire to see that. Creepy ghost children uh is not my thing.
Kids are creepy.
And it is creepy.
Yeah.
As
I
you were
have to ask you,
talking
did you receive
about
a phone call after you?
sure,
You know,
what was the question?
I'm wondering, like at the birthday party, did you receive a phone call after watching it?
No. No, I did not. Thank goodness.
That's good. You're still
Yeah.
here, so that's
Um,
meaning that
yes.
Yeah. But yeah,
Thankfully
it's
didn't nothing
creepy
came out
ghost
of
kids are. I actually wrote a flash fiction story about a creepy ghost kid that I really need to work on. I find again, kids are great. Kids are awesome, but creepy kids. It's I don't want to get off track with like talking about like the Exorcist and like the Omen, but it's like
Yeah.
creepy kids can be really. It's
Yeah,
that's like
I the creepy ghost
they can
kid is
scare the crap out of you.
definitely a genre that I have not a lot of desire um
Yeah.
to read or watch about, although I did read a very good book recently involving a ghost kid. Not a creepy one though.
Mm,
More sad than anything else. It was
yeah.
Immortelle by Catherine Silva. That was very good.
Hmm.
Just as a good like sad ghost story, not necessarily a
Yeah.
terrifying ghost story, because those exist as well. Um,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
but
sometimes it's good to kind of read. Like I think one of the classic ones from my childhood that I loved, and I've read at least one or two more of her books, is Wait Till Helen Comes. I don't know if you ever read that. That was
mm,
like um, that was a really good kind of like like a girl um, that's kind of it's like a little girl kind of encounters a ghost. It's been so long, honestly, since I've read it, but I do remember reading that when I was a kid, and that was a creepy, kind of spooky, like middle grade kind of um,
mm,
ghost story book. But it's some of them, yeah, they don't always have to be either like gory or horrific, but yeah, sometimes um, they make for spooky reading and watching
mm-hmm.
if it's a film.
Yes, indeed. Or game. There are plenty of creepy ghost child games as well. Um,
Yes.
and um, so on a related subject, because it's all
Hmm.
related. In terms of ghosts and death, ghosts and death are pretty thoroughly entwined in most, if not all, ghost stories. How do ghost stories
Yeah.
enable readers to relate to the subject of death?
I think because ultimately, like a ghost is essentially, the spirit of someone who has passed. So I think it's, ghost stories, whether we read them or watch them or listen to them, I think it's ultimately, what ghost stories can teach us is that, ultimately, eventually, we will, die, our people, we will die at some point. So I think it kind of teaches us that, eventually, our time will be up, and it's what will happen to us after that. I mean, that's a lot of times that's kind of up for debate. Will we go cross over into the light? Will we do we not want to cross over into the light? Do we want to stay there? And I think it's interesting. Some ghosts, in ghost stories, it's they either they just want to stay here. They don't want to accept that the fact that they're dead. But I think ultimately it does kind of teach us that when our time is up, um, you know it is up. And I think there was a story I read recently by Charles Dickens. I'm blanking on the title, but it was I received his classic was complete ghost stories for Christmas. It was a short story collection of all of his ghost stories that also included a Christmas Carol. But it was essentially, I believe, about um, these siblings who one of them died when they were kids, and it was all about the sister became like an angel and would essentially go to the living plane, and as the brother would grow up and would take like a loved one from the brother, and of course all the siblings wanted to do was to kind of meet again, you know, in the afterlife. And it was never the brother's time. It was never the brother's time. But I think it kind of teaches us that life is precious, and it could come. It can end. It can end sooner, or it can end later. I think there's so much. I think death. Ghost stories can teach us about death. I think can also teach us, particularly with a Christmas Carol, that kind of harken back to Dickens, what where will you go, and what your life will be worth, depending on what you do when you're living, with the ghosts, and the ghosts haunting, and showing Ebenezer Scrooge, if he doesn't reform his ways, you know you could he could essentially become like them, just like these wandering specters that they can't have peace. um, and so I think it's ghost stories. I think it teaches us a lot. It teaches us that I think life is precious, and really try to do the best you can with your life, you know when you can. So I think it teaches us a lot.
Hmm. Yep, that is that is true. Um, I when I was thinking about it, I was kind of getting stuck on the idea that like ghost stories are I feel like they are a way to hold on to the people that have already passed on. Um, Sort of maybe getting an idea of some kind of closure with this, like, oh, they're coming back and they're I get to see them again. I get to maybe say things that weren't said. There's unfinished business perhaps that needs to be finished. Um, and I so I do think closure is definitely a huge reason that ghost stories do get told too. Um, and I wrote a ghost story last year, and that I think closure is definitely one of those themes that sort of goes unsaid during the book. Um, but I'm curious because you mentioned that you were working on a ghost story, uh, and I would like to hear more about that, if you wouldn't mind telling
It's
me
yeah,
and
it
the
yeah, definitely. So my it's I've been working on this for a very long time. It's basically about a psychic detective that is plagued by these ghosts um, during a kind of horrific murder investigation, and he's trying to kind of juggle all of dealing with the fact that these ghosts are contacting him, and you know he's a he's a high profile, high ranking police official, so he's trying to juggle that. Um, his family, who's starting to think that he's like, is he losing it? Is like, what is going on with him? And of course, his career, because it's the issue kind of gets out, and it's under a lot of scrutiny. So it's really it's about dealing with this ability of communicating, this special ability with communicating with the dead. Um,
Hmm.
and how again, what do these ghosts want, and why are they plaguing him? It's like, why me? It's and trying to bring, again, like you said, bring closure and bring justice um, to this crime that's been committed. So yeah, it's an idea I've had in my head for a long time. I wrote the first draft during National Novel Writing Month back in, I think, was it 2015, 2016,
Oh,
and I've kind of worked on it, and
nice.
it's one of my, I think, best stories. I'm very proud of it because, again, I come from a law enforcement family, so it's I put a lot of you know um, my appreciation of that into and my proudness of that into the story. So it's something I definitely want to publish someday. It's just I got to kind of work out some of the kind of the story and logistical and accuracy issues with police procedural stuff with that. But I definitely want to work on that. But it's been something that I've wanted to work on for quite some time.
Nice. Do you have a working title yet, or is it that still in consideration?
That's still in consideration. I've got a couple of things that I kind of go back and forth, but it's that's titles are I find titles are tough. I don't know, like, how do you feel? Like, are you a good do you are you a good title person?
I usually those things end up coming to me towards the end of a project. Like,
Mm.
um, I think I've rarely had something where I've been like, oh yeah, this is a great title from like chapter one, and just gone with it. I think on almost everything that I've published, I've changed the what I've been
Yeah.
calling it, just because I was like, all right, this doesn't make any sense. Let's pick something that
Yeah.
is a little
Delete,
more
change.
intriguing, or
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I do have, let's see here. Uh, there is a whole section on hauntings, which I had wanted to get into. We did touch upon quite a few of the things um, earlier on. We talked about the kinds of people, places that ghosts are drawn to, or the kinds of people that ghosts are drawn to. But the other thing we did talk about too was like ghosts, not necessarily haunting a place, but sort of haunting a person. So they're able to
Mm-hmm.
move, like in the Grudge, it, follows somebody
Yep.
to the USA, so it's not necessarily haunting a place as much as it is haunting a person, or in a
Yep.
series of people. Um, but then there's also just the haunted houses, as a particularly strong genre of ghost horror. Um, and I did recently have the opportunity to attend a Horror Writers Association university class. That was Monday night, which was taught by
Oh,
Gwendolyn
nice.
Keist, now creating haunted house stories, and it was really fascinating to dig
Ooh.
deep and rummage through these different facets, um, of not just how you're describing your ghosts as characters, but also setting up your mood for your story and portraying your house as a
Mm-hmm.
character, which we had talked about before. Um, so I was curious, we had also talked about The Haunting of Hill House, of course, having a really good house as a character. Are there any other haunted house stories that you are particularly fond of?
So you mean like in like fiction, film, or any?
Fiction, film, yeah, really all the mediums.
Yeah. I think I touched on it a little bit, but The Shining, in terms of like haunted, I think haunted places. I mean, that's such a classic, haunted place kind of story. The Overlook Hotel. Again, it's a like Hill House. It feeds on, the ghosts inside. The house itself, but like the hotel itself, but the ghosts feed on Danny Torrance, and of course they feed on um, Jack Torrance, and just the way that the situation that King presented and wrote the story, that sense of isolation in the snowbound, hotel. There was really no almost means of really difficult means of escape, and so they're like held up in this hotel with not only the ghosts, but um, Jack Torrance is ultimately will eventually will go. He goes insane and attacks his family. So there's so many um, elements that are attacking this poor family. So I thought King did a really good job of setting the mood and the atmosphere with that particular haunted house story. Again, another one I'm going to throw King into the mix again. Rose Red, his miniseries. I thought that was a really well done, haunted house story about a house that literally changes and attacks whoever comes within feet of it. I thought he did a really good job with that. Again, he wrote it I think as an homage to Hill House. Let's see. I think one of my favorite haunted house movies came out in I think 2001 was The Others, with Alejandro. I think
Oh,
Amenabar
yeah.
wrote and directed that. That is such a
Yeah,
classic. I mean, talk about
that's good.
atmospheric and spooky. It takes place in this. I think it was at an English manor during the war. And again, it's a family. They're in the country. I don't recall seeing another estate for like miles, so they're kind of cut off. They're like by the mansion's by itself, and they're all alone. This mother and Two kids are of, I think, they have this uh, illness towards or disease towards the light. I think it needs to be like constantly dark in the mansion, so
Yep.
they're kind of like really cut off from the world, and then they take on this help, played by, I think that the main one's played by Fanula Flanagan, an amazing actress, and
Mm.
they're plagued by this supernatural or this paranormal force. There's a twist. I don't want to give away the twist, but it's so well done, and it's just they're holed up in this house. It's this spooky mansion. I love spooky mansion stories, and it's such a classic. Um, yeah, I'm a
That one
fan of
is
that one.
really
It's a class. That's a good one. What are some of yours?
um sorry, the cat just decided that he also wants to be part of the live stream. So
Of course.
um some of yeah,
Yes, every right.
some of my favorites definitely The Shining and Doctor Sleep. I think especially in Doctor Sleep, the return to the Overlook Hotel is just particularly creepy. Um, and I really liked going back. Um, and then there is actually a video game that I think is so brilliantly done, and it's a really small game. It's one that a lot of people probably have not heard of, but it's called Anatomy. Um, and
Hmm,
the developer
I
is
haven't.
Kitty Horror Show, and it's basically you're in a house and you go into the dining room and there's an audio cassette on the table that you play, and it's this like it's almost kind of like it's a it's a recording about houses. It almost kind of sounds like somebody's how to build a house kind of recording,
Really?
and it's and with each um you explore a different room, and the cassette changes for each room. It talks about the kitchen, it talks about the basement, the master bedroom, and it gets creepier and
Hmm.
creepier as you go along. There's of course no lights on in the house, um, and eventually you find the basement develops like teeth, like and eats you. Um, but it definitely does that whole like house as a human body um
Yep. Like Hill House kind of. Yeah.
comparison.
Yep.
Exactly, but it's so good. And that came out probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago maybe. I'm probably
Hmm.
not thinking about
Is that
that
is that for
right.
like
Probably
computer, or is that like an entertainment system?
it is a computer game. Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
it's a computer
I'll
game.
have to check that out. Yeah.
Um yeah, I think you can find it on Itch.io maybe. I can't
Hmm.
quite remember what platform it's on. Maybe on Steam, possibly. But um, so those, and then
Interesting.
of
Yeah,
course the
I think
Haunting of
like
Hill
video
House.
games. I don't play a lot of video games, but I think video games. Again, I'm getting out of the topic of ghost stories, but video games can. Oh, actually, no. I remember years ago I played with a friend of mine. He had Silent Hill, which is
Yeah,
ghostly kind of.
Silent.
It's ghosts. It's like a lot of things. And I remember, I think I played it like once or twice, and I just remember being like, "This is one creepy game." I don't remember which Silent
Yeah,
Hill I played, but I'm just like, this is it. Again, it's like it's atmospheric. It was spooky, very kind of unnerving. Just the way that like the video game was just designed. It was just the setting was really it kind of blew me away. Like wow, like a video game. Like I could see that in movies and like TV, but I didn't realize they could go in that direction with a video game, particularly with a video game at that time. Again, that was probably over 10 years ago. But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, video games are very impressive. I should play more of them. I don't play video games too often, but I do find them interesting.
Yeah, I don't play them as often as I should, but I watch a lot of
Mm.
Let's Plays of them, and I do get a lot of inspiration from video games. Just as a medium, I feel like uh, horror writers could get a lot more from them if we played them more. But that is a possible discussion for um, a
Yes.
future interview because
Yeah.
we are coming towards
What
the
is your
end of
inspiration
our
for writing?
uh,
Yes.
it is almost 9 o'clock, so I do want to wrap it up, but I want to wrap it up with a few last questions. So one of the questions I was going to ask you was if you were a ghost with a choice of who, where, or what you could haunt, what would it be?
I think yeah. I was. I think if I were a ghost, I would probably haunt people I know, but I wouldn't. I do like I I do like something kind of playful and like like more like being like a little bit of a nuisance, but like I wouldn't I wouldn't do anything violent or really anything that would like drive them like insane. But I would definitely maybe haunt some people I know, maybe people that kind of annoyed me, and maybe just give that final kind of like hey But I'd never do anything that would I wouldn't torture them or like truly terrorize them, but like maybe haunt them for like a little bit, maybe like overturn something, slam the maybe be like a noisy little poltergeist for like a little bit, then kind of What about
So
you?
you'd basically come back as a friendly slash mischievous ghost.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I had
exactly.
decided that I'd probably haunt a coffee shop. That just seems to tick all the boxes. It's there's coffee,
Yeah,
there's the smell of coffee, the
yeah,
you get your pitching in, and then at night it's nice and quiet, and there's no one there to bug you. So
yeah.
seems like a pretty
I
good
say if wherever we're
combination.
going, if there's no coffee there, I'd hunt a coffee shop too. So
Yeah. Yep.
and I'd
And
haunt
then
an indie
the
bookstore.
last question. Oh, and yeah, bookstore, of course, right?
Yep.
If you could
Yeah,
actually
I
like
literally just
open
thought
the
of
book and
that.
open the books and
And
actually read
especially if it
them.
has a coffee, like a
Um,
cafe.
yeah, yeah, good combination. Um,
Yeah.
so the last question that I have is, besides we've talked about a lot of book recommendations and film recommendations, but what other books would you
Yep.
recommend for our viewers about ghosts?
Absolutely. I've got a big list here, but I will try to. Yeah. So definitely, Bag of Bones by Stephen King. I think that in Salem's Lot and like The Green Mile are my three favorite King novels. Bag of Bones is a really spooky and atmospheric ghost story set in Maine by the Master. It's about a writer that's plagued by particularly ghostly vision of his late wife. It's really, really well written. Um, Ghost Trap by Dave Lowell, who's another a fellow Maine writer. I got that book a long time ago. It was an autographed copy, and it's got ghosts, pirates. Takes place on on the coast of Maine. It's like it's got everything. It like ticks all the boxes for my kind of ghost story. Let's see. Paranormal Provincetown is a really. I'm a big fan of nonfiction. Um, you know, Local haunts or nonfiction. Spooky stories. But Paranormal Provincetown by Sam Baltrusis. He's a local writer. Is about all true spooky encounters. on the Cape. It's very well written. It's I highly recommend that. Let's see. And of course, Snowblind by Christopher Golden is, ghosts that come back during a big blizzard. It again, like it ticks off all the boxes for a creepy ghost story, particularly a ghost horror novel. It's
Nice.
to me, it's a masterpiece. What about
Nice.
you?
I hadn't heard about that one. I'll have to check that one out.
Oh, that's a really good one. Yeah.
Nice. So I had written down a few. I have Six Rooms by Gemma Amor, Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Keist, which is actually coming out in 2022. Her other book, The
Nice.
Invention of Ghosts, is another great one to look forward. I did read Come With Me by Ronald Malfi last year, and that is like one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. So I would
Yep.
definitely recommend that to anyone, not
Nice.
just people who love ghost stories. I'm
Yep.
also going to include things like Immortelle by Catherine McCarthy, Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia,
Oh,
House
I've
of
heard of that.
Leaves,
Yep.
which is like kind of ghost story. Definitely has some like haunted house stuff. House of Leaves is by Mark Z. Danielewski, and The Cellar Door short story by Emma J. Gibbon from her short story collection.
Nice.
That's also a really, really good story.
Mhm.
Um,
I'll check those out.
so yeah. So I will, in conclusion, I'm gonna say thank you for joining us for our discussion about ghost stories this evening. In closing, I'd like to ask Kevin if you could let people know where they can find out more info about you and your work.
Sure. So I'm on Facebook. I am on Amazon. I can certainly drop my Amazon link in the comments, but it's I'm on Amazon as Kevin Lewis. So you can check out my page. It's my solo novella, The Cat Creeper, is on there, as well as some of the anthologies that I've been published in. Some of them have ghost stories in them.
Nice. I will be including those links when I upload this to YouTube, so you'll be able to look down in
Awesome.
the general information and find those links if you are interested in learning more about Kevin Lewis's works. Um, and so again, thanks for joining us. I will say, put the plug in to join us next week, Thursday, January 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be talking with Rob Smales about slow burn horror with character development. Really looking forward to that discussion, so make sure to tune in then. And everybody have a good night, and don't let the ghosts haunt you.
Yeah.
And
Thank you very
take
much,
care.
Kate. This was a lot of fun, Kat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. This was a lot of fun.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have